I suppose many of you who have attended some of the others must be pretty tired by now, but fortunately, you're at a panel of one of the most interesting and important aspects of journalism, investigative journalism. It's what journalism, at its core and at its best, is what it's about. So before we show some clips that are examples of what our illustrious winners have produced, I want to introduce them as individuals, and first comes Noah. Noah is an investigative reporter for WTSP 10 News, which is in Tampa. He has won 4 regional Edward R. Murrow Awards for news and sports reporting, including our DuPont national recognition in 2013 for exposing safety issues on youth soccer fields. Noah has also been honored 6 times with Emmy Awards for investigative reporting and the National George Polk Award. Wow, that's pretty amazing. He just won a DuPont last night for exposing red light camera abuses in Tampa, Florida. You're going to find this really interesting. Next is Wendy Halloran, who is the senior investigative reporter for KPNX 12 News in Phoenix, Arizona. She's an accomplished investigative journalist, I can assure you. She has been honored with national awards, 5 Emmys, multiple regional state awards, First Amendment awards, and Freedom of Information awards. In 2009, she broke a national investigation after uncovering fake college diplomas that had infiltrated all levels of the U.S. Army, including the Army Aviation and Missile Command. Wendy has won this year's DuPont Award for her extraordinary probe into the Phoenix Fire Department arson squad, which had been cited as the country's most successful arson squad until Wendy got her hands on them. Some of its members accused and falsely arrested innocent people for arson fires, which they did not set. And Wendy made sure that things were righted. Clark Fouraker has spent the past 3 years as a Saturday morning news anchor and investigative reporter at News 19 WLTX, and now works as an investigative reporter at First Coast News at WLTV/WJXX.
You got 2.
Yeah, wow. He has broken news and done investigations for the station in Columbia, South Carolina since 2011. Clark just won his DuPont for his team's look. It's a very important, sad, but compelling story about the failure of South Carolina's Department of Social Justices to catch child abuse. And finally, we have Madeleine Baran. Am I pronouncing it right? With the right accent on the right syllable? Okay. She's a reporter for Minneapolis Public Radio. She frequently reports on corruption, poverty, mental health, and child abuse. She won awards from the Minnesota Society of Professional Journalists for her reporting on the state's mental health system, the St. Paul Police Crime Lab, welfare policy, and the FBI files of Senator Paul Wellstone. She just won our DuPont Award for NPR's News year-long investigation into how leaders of the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis continued to cover up abuse of children by priests, despite decades of assurances from the Archdiocese that it was safe. And it was a very, very interesting and complete, thorough reporting. So we're going to get to look a little bit at some clips before we get into some question and answers here, and we'll take a look.
Red light cameras are a for-profit business.
James Walker's with the nonprofit National Motorists Association. He says Florida's issuing thousands of tickets a day to people who simply roll through right turns or just run out of time going straight.
I think it's totally about money. I think it's immoral. You're basically punishing safe drivers with deliberately improper engineering.
Walker says longer yellow lights would make things safer. He says adding just a half second to yellow intervals would give well-intended drivers more time to stop. Local cities in the state are also ignoring federal guidelines that suggest adding an extra half second above the minimum whenever a lot of trucks or elderly drivers are present. US 19 has lots of both. And we found other red light camera intersections with problems too. In Tampa, the yellow lights at Hillsborough in Nebraska and 50th at Adamo both change faster than the state allows. In Valrico, Hillsborough County improperly shortened the yellows on Bell Shoals Road. And both St. Pete and Oldsmar learned that they were issuing citations for $158 a pop at intersections where the yellow intervals were too short. They've since fixed the timings, but victims of the short yellows were never notified and never refunded their money. When Oldsmar lengthened the yellow light at Tampa Road and State Street, tickets plummeted by 90%.
I don't think our citizens should be penalized for yellow lights that have been artificially reduced.
State Senator Jeff Brandis tweaked a few red light camera regulations in the closing moments of this year's session, but he couldn't change the length of yellow lights. Why? You can thank red light camera company American Traffic Solutions. 10 News found they've donated more than $500,000 to political campaigns in Florida alone and upwards of $1 million lobbying. With American Traffic Solutions spokesperson Charles Torito.
What is all the lobbying money for? Are you buying influence in Tallahassee?
Not at all. What we're trying to do is educate the legislature and share with them the facts about not only the safety benefits, but the economic benefits.
But those benefits come at a price for local drivers like Shirley Nagel.
I'm not a lawbreaker. I try not to be.
When we sat down and spoke earlier this month, our conversation centered on the arson squad and details he apparently wasn't aware of. You didn't know anything about this?
No, ma'am.
What Chief Kahn didn't know much about was the department's arson-sniffing dog, a secret weapon, who, according to his handler, never gets it wrong.
Show me. Show me better. Should be a lot more than that, though, huh, Sammy?
You think, wouldn't there?
See? See? No, you gotta put your nose down. At least fake it for me, okay?
Is that appropriate?
No, it's embarrassing. That he used that phrase is embarrassing, I think, for all of us. It is for myself.
Captain Fred Andes is the dog's handler. Last year, he was awarded Arson Investigator of the Year from the Phoenix Fire Department. In the video you just saw, Barbara Sloan, the woman whose house burned down, ended up being arrested and charged with arson. After 2 years and $300,000 of her money, her case was dismissed by the Maricopa County Attorney in the interests of justice.
I lost almost everything because of it.
Prosecutors reviewing Sloan's case concluded lead investigator Captain Sam Richardson, who shot the video of Captain Andes and the dog, was an inexperienced fire investigator. Richardson would admit he arrested Sloan solely because she was the homeowner. He had no evidence tying her to the fire.
July 1st, 2013, Richland County deputies were called to Ginyard's home. Reports say they found Robert face up, unresponsive.
Through full body x-rays, basically, we were able to determine not only an immediate traumatic injury to the child, but also a history of abuse.
Richland County Coroner Gary Watts ruled blunt force trauma to the head and body the cause of death.
There was certainly an extensive history of this.
She grabbed him by the back of his shirt and threw him from one side of the living room to the other side of the living room. When he wouldn't stop crying, she took him upstairs and continued to beat him.
His aunt, Natalie Thompson, says she saw the abuse about 6 months before he died.
The only thing we could hear was him just calling Auntie, and I left because I couldn't deal with it, and called Department of Social Service to come out then.
DSS call records and investigator reports are sealed. But Thompson says after that first call in January of 2013, she called DSS 5 more times and visited in person twice. Both cases happened in Richland County. Senator Katrina Shealy, alongside Senate colleagues investigating DSS, say there's turnover trouble.
This is a problem all over the state of South Carolina.
All because workers have too many cases. But we found our own turnover trouble in a document showing workers once employed by DSS but no longer there, still on the work roster with cases next to their names weeks after they left DSS. If this list is up to date, That's a problem, says child welfare attorney Jay Elliott, who's worked on child abuse issues for the past 4 decades.
Well, obviously, if a kid's in danger, you can't just let that kid sit there and be exposed.
We showed him that document, a confidential Richland County roster we obtained from March 30th of this year. On it, at least 3 employees who left the agency or were fired weeks, sometimes months before.
If you're giving out statistics about the size of caseloads, and you include these imaginary workers, these phantom workers in your count, it makes the caseload look much smaller.
At every step of the way, this could have been prevented. This is just failure after failure after failure after failure.
Hasselberger is speaking publicly for the first time. For 5 years, she worked as the canon lawyer for the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis. It was her job to advise the Archbishop on the laws of the Roman Catholic Church, which includes specific rules on confronting grave sins, like child abuse. Hasselberger's concern with Father Wehmeyer began in 2008, when she checked his personnel file on a routine matter. She realized Wehmeyer had a sex addiction, and the Archdiocese knew about it.
Nobody at the parish was told, look out.
And they were supposed to be told that?
Yes.
He was known as the Polka Padre.
I've got a never-ending love for you. From now on, that's all I want to do.
Robert Capone was ordained a priest in the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis in 1964 and served in 7 parishes. Capone played his accordion and performed what he called polka masses at churches throughout the Twin Cities. The Polka Padre later became known in the media as the Polka Predator, when young men came forward in the late 80s and early 90s to sue Capone and the Archdiocese for sexual abuse they say they suffered as children. An NPR News investigation has found that the Archdiocese allowed Capone to take medical retirement and gave him an extra $957 a month, above and beyond his pension. Those extra payments from 1998 to 2012 added up to more than $160,000. Capone still lives on this property in Cold Spring and winters in Florida. The $500,000 home is secluded. It's one of the places where Capone abused young boys. On a recent afternoon, Capone was taking care of some yard work. He jumped off the lawnmower to answer a few questions. He's a trim 74-year-old with a full head of white hair and dark sunglasses. Because of his history of abuse, Capone is supposed to be carefully monitored. I asked him about it. Do you have any contact with the Archdiocese still?
About once a month.
Okay. So does someone come visit you, or how does that work?
Well, not really. We just get together, at different times.
So is it so it's someone?
But I just meet with a priest that I want to, up here or wherever.
Is it that monitoring program?
No.
And you should see the complete reports. These are just, excerpts, but the complete reports are amazing and show a lot of diligence and hard work and the work that, we journalists are very proud of. There's so many different ways to come upon stories that you then investigate. It can be from a neighbor telling you about a story. It can be from an anonymous tip, a would-be whistleblower. Sometimes it's just your gut instinct. Something doesn't seem right and you want to look further. There's so many different ways that get you going. So I want to ask all of you how you came upon each of your stories and what it was. So, we'll go in order.
In the case of the red light cameras, this happened to be one of those where it was a gut instinct. But a lot of what we do, sometimes it comes from a tip, sometimes it's gut instinct, sometimes it's following up on breaking news of something other sort. This happened to be, I was working general assignment, filling in for reporters on Christmas Day 2 years ago. I was covering a fatal accident, your typical news day in our world where someone died, I go out, we're shooting a little video, we talk to some people around the intersection, we were about to get ready to go leave. But I looked at the red light at the intersection, and the yellow was really, really short. This was a little suburban area way out in the boonies of Florida. but it still didn't seem right. I said, well, maybe the light malfunctioned, or maybe something was awry. So I reached out to the county after the story. This was a case also where we followed up after the breaking news story with a little more in-depth look. And long story short, we found out that their yellow lights were too short. They didn't have any red light cameras in that county, but that prompted us to then say, wait a minute, if their yellow lights are too short, what about all of the ones with these huge cameras that are raking in millions of dollars for Florida? And that led us down the road where we went through one public record after another after another. And I think one of the things that a lot of our stories have in common, I certainly know for the Wendy and Clark stories, and probably to a degree from Madeleine too, although it's tough when you're dealing with churches, so much of what we do is public record. The only difference in a lot of cases between a general assignment report in TV and an investigative report is the amount of public records we're digging through. On the day of turn, you don't have time to do all that stuff, but almost every state has significant public records, which means you can get access to these documents, whether it's traffic lights, arson reports, DSS reports. There's so much public, and most of our stories at the end of the day come down to the things we request and get back. I think a lot of people assume investigative reporting is like undercover and doing a lot of that stuff. I kind of loathe it. It takes a lot of time and it usually doesn't work out right. Public documents are the fundamental blueprint to almost every story we do, no matter how we start on them.
And yet it was, a reporter's gut instinct that got the whole ball rolling, and that shows the curiosity and just, going with your instinct sometimes has the biggest payoff. And Wendy, how did you come upon yours?
Well, ours was an incredible story. It actually started in 2012. We had a bankrupt millionaire who was standing trial for arson. He was accused of burning down his mansion. He escaped using scuba gear and miraculously survived this. It was very, very, very strange. And anyhow, he goes on trial in the Maricopa County Superior Court. And the trial takes about 6 weeks, and on the day that the jury returned its verdict and pronounced him guilty, he swallowed cyanide and killed himself in the courtroom in front of everyone. And he had ingested enough cyanide to wipe out the entire courtroom. He was hell-bent he was not going to prison. His name was Michael Marin, and it made national news. It was devastating to see that on a camera, to see it play out. He was dead within 7 minutes. And very, very sad, very sad. Within a matter of weeks, I got a bombshell of an email from this man who was the boyfriend of one of my victims. And he said, oh, you've seen nothing yet. They're using this arson dog in my girlfriend's case, just like they used in the bankrupt millionaire's case, in which they did. And the dog hit on many areas in the mansion that burned down, and he was pronounced guilty. And so that's what started the ball rolling. He said, I have this video of the arson investigator coercing the dog to put her nose down and come on, at least fake it for me, okay? When she put her nose down, when he said fake it, that dog supposedly detected 3 spots where accelerants were used to start the fire. But the crime lab came back and said, oh, not so fast. There's no accelerants present here. Your dog, these are false hits. So that's what started the ball rolling for the investigations, and we've done 18 subsequent reports over the course of 2 years. My colleagues in the front row here, Jeff Blackburn, my photographer, Brian West also did photography work and social media work, and my managing editor, Mark Phillips, right here, played a pivotal role in the writing of this reporting, and it was extensive and it was deep. We struggled immensely getting public records. Even though the fire reports are public records, there was a concerted effort to suppress these reports from us.
How did they get hold of that videotape that showed the dog being coached?
It was part of the civil case in one of the cases. And then when I saw it for the first time, my jaw was on the floor.
And then you knew, bingo, you had a story.
And then I requested it through a public records request, and they knew right then and there, uh-oh, we've got a problem here. And I said in my request, I have this video, I know what it says, do not withhold it from me, and do not redact it. You do not have the right to do that. So I was very fortunate with that aspect of it, but the rest was very, very difficult to obtain.
Terrific. And how about Clark? That's such a sad story.
It was sad. Good afternoon, everyone. It was a phone call. The aunt who you saw called us, and said, "I'm mad at our social service agency. They've done my family wrong." And the unfortunate truth, no matter what newsroom you work in, you're going to get a call once a week from a parent or a grandparent or a family member who says so-and-so is not doing it right, and send your cameras and fly the helicopter over my house and let's get them, and that's not always, the right thing, and parents are confused, blah, blah, lots of things happen. Anyway, in this case, the call was differentiated because the aunt who you saw said, my sister's beating her kid, DSS has done nothing, and I have photos. And so the reporter and all of us kind of went, okay, wait a minute. Photos sort of changes the game on what you're talking about, and if, we can validate your story a little bit. So we ended up, at this point, the young boy was dead already, and so we got her photos and kind of heard her out. At that point, not even sure if this was ever going to go to air. Again, these are sensitive he said, she says at some point until you're able to really get, you're dealing with the family dynamic. And so kind of the linchpin for us was we went to a coroner who, through reporting, I had a good relationship with, and I kind of laid out for him what I had been told, that I had the photos, and he was able to confirm enough that we knew at least the core couple of things that we had 2 or 3 things that we knew and had been confirmed enough that we could get on the air. For us, one of the things that happened is social workers in our state were just so desperate for somebody to talk to. We did one story, and it was a wave after that. The day after that first story aired, that was when we had more people, more caseworkers, more former employees who were aware of that case, more people that had an email, where we were able to put a lot of the other ancillary details surrounding his one case into a number of more stories. And it was the same thing. It kept adding on. More people said, here's what you don't know yet. Here's some more information. It was like tumbleweed, kind of rolling down a field or something. And so at the end of 2014, we produced about 40 stories on the agency and whatnot.
It's really a mark of true diligence and follow through, and it was really compelling. And we'll get to what the results of all of your stories in a moment. Now, Madeleine, tell us how you found out about your story, because as someone, I think it was Noah mentioned, when it comes to the church, it's very difficult. You don't have the same sort of access. So how did you come upon your story?
Right, yeah, it is totally different. I mean, the Catholic Church is not a democracy. There is no right that you have to look at their files. It's like the same as I have no right to go into my neighbor's house and start looking through their stuff, so it's a completely different world. This started in July of 2013 when our newsroom got a phone call from a woman who said that she was one of the top advisors to the Archbishop in the Catholic Archdiocese of the Twin Cities, and that she wanted to talk to us. And she got transferred over to me. She was familiar with my reporting. The story of the investigation I had just finished was about an Episcopal boarding school and that had its own sex abuse cover-up scandal, which I reported on. And so I got connected to her, didn't know who she was. She had resigned. She wanted to come forward and talk about why she'd resigned, which was in protest of how the Archdiocese had been handling clergy sex abuse cases. And what was really striking about what she was telling me right away that got my attention was that she was talking about something that was happening right now. Like, she wasn't talking about, it wasn't someone calling me and saying, oh, like 20 years ago when this clergy sex abuse scandal was a big deal, well, I've got more information about that. And you're like, well, thanks, but we know that. This was stuff that was happening still. And so from there, I went over and met with her and started doing backgrounding about her, met with my editors. We started to put together a team. At the peak of our effort, which is ongoing, and so it started in July of 2013, we had 16 people on our team. And then we started to talk to other sources. I started to get thousands of leaked documents out of the Chancery in St. Paul. One person, I even got, like, for example, a secret recording that someone had made of the Archbishop talking to his priest privately while our stories were running. So it just kind of continued. And so we were sort of doing all this
the first call came in, and we're doing all this research, we're getting documents, I'm interviewing the whistleblower, and about 3 months or so go by before we publish and air our first story. And then we did a series of investigative stories throughout the fall of 2013, and there was all this fallout from that, and that brought more sources to come forward, and the story grew and grew, and eventually sent us down to Louisiana and became a national story. But it started with that one phone call.
I think it was Clark who mentioned that he had a source in the coroner's office, and that was important to getting the story out. I mean, you certainly mentioned she was the general counsel of the...
She was like the canon lawyer. She's a chancellor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was, if not for you would not have, if not for her call, you would not have had a story there, most likely. Same thing with your coroner. Wendy, was it the friend of the woman who was in trouble that was your key source?
Yes, that was my key source for that particular case, but it was a daunting task to find other cases, and I ended up finding 4 other cases of people who were innocent, who were falsely accused and arrested. So it was definitely that tip, but I put together an 8-minute Dateline-ish piece on this bankrupt millionaire who killed himself. And it was an elaborate piece we put together. It was just fantastic. That's when we got 8 minutes. That was a couple of years ago. Now we don't get as much time. But that jarred a lot of people and dredged this up for him, essentially. Just doing that report on his life and death in the courtroom by cyanide.
Noah, do you find that investigations are a hard sell to your news management because they take so much time? I mean, I was impressed by how much time you all were afforded to complete these stories. It runs against the narrative of, what we hear about local news. There are not enough people, you don't have the resources, but what was wonderful about serving on the jury was to see just how fantastic some of the work being done out in the country is. So how about all of your news managements? Do you have to sometimes argue with them?
Every day. No matter what it is, we tend to think we deserve more time than we probably do. A lot of it has to do with the management. I know right now we have less time than we used to get too. I'm still fortunately afforded 2 to 3 minutes though for a good investigation, which we might have gotten 6 or 7 for something really outstanding a few years ago. But the quality of your final product is directly related to the quality of the stuff on the cutting room floor. If you have a 4-minute piece where you didn't say, I had 10 amazing sound bites that I cut out of it, it shouldn't be 4 minutes. I think every piece at the end of the day should be about half of what you think it should be in the beginning. So most of my pieces now, if they end up at 2.5 minutes, I first write them out and they're 5 or 6. And we say, what can we afford to get rid of? Because in TV news, especially, and in probably radio as well, you can't afford to let someone zone out on you. You can't afford to lose the audience for 1 second. On TV, you have 100+ choices on any given day. So if you lose someone for a second in some mumbo jumbo they didn't need to hear, they're off in the Daily Show, or they're off on something else at 11 o'clock at night. So our biggest challenge is making our pieces so action-packed and so tight that we hold the viewer.
And that's a difficult task because sometimes it can, in worst-case scenarios, lead to sensationalizing a story that's compelling in its own right, but in this effort to grab and keep the viewer or listener sometimes. But what was so impressive about all your reports, that they were compelling and really interesting throughout, and there was no fancy footwork, and it was just great reporting. So how about your management, Wendy?
They're wonderful. I always have the
And they're
burden.
not in the audience, right?
Well, the little one right
There's
there.
a hidden camera somewhere.
They're wonderful, but I always have the burden of proof, and I always go for the jugular. That's what the viewers want to see. If you're going to put on a compelling investigative report, you have to have the goods, and you present it that way. But you also be fair and balanced, as you saw with the fire chief. I had given him a full year of chances to respond to me. In fact, I even provided him with some of the evidence, so he was informed about his arson unit, but he seemed to feign ignorance to me, if you will. And that's what led to his, sudden retirement a year early, by the way. No, they're wonderful. It's so important in this day and age. Viewers are tuning out. They're looking at their cell phones, and we're not seeing the ratings that we used to see. So it's very important in investigative work that you give your viewers a reason to care. And when you are exposing something that there is extreme malfeasance, wrongdoing, corruption, misconduct, as these arson investigators were engaging in misconduct, the viewers want to see that because these are the people that they are supposed to trust. So our pieces generally are now about 4.5 to 5 minutes in length, but I have to have the goods, and it has to roll, and it has to be direct, to the point, and compelling, visually, and the writing, and everything.
And you're right about, going for the jugular, which doesn't always mean, an ambush or anything like that, but being really well prepared with your set of questions so that you're not being, run over. And I have to say, you're this, very demure and sweet person, but when I saw you doing those interviews, I thought, whoa, I'm glad I'm under the lights with this woman.
It's a good cover.
Wow, she was just dogged, and one question after another, and it was, every single question like that had a payoff, and it was terrific.
Well, I did a lot of work. I have a legal background, and I did a lot of studying on my weekends of grand jury transcripts, court transcripts. I studied, I memorized. I didn't go into this interview with a list of questions. It was all in my head. And that's how I do it. That's how I operate best. I was very well prepared, and I would encourage you in your careers to do the same. Know your subject like the top of your hand. It's critical.
It's also critical to listen. So often reporters go in with a list of questions, and they're busy waiting till till the answer is finished so they can get on to the next question, and meanwhile they've missed a little nugget or a gem there. So part of the art, not just of interviewing, is not just the preparation, but of listening and thinking on your feet, the way you would as a trial lawyer.
And I knew that the fire chief was in trouble. I just knew that I had all of the evidence, in my head. I knew he was in trouble, and he tried to talk his way out of it. But I think a good lesson for everyone, though, is to be very polite and professional.
Absolutely.
And not aggressive. I tried to be who I am normally and give him the opportunity. I didn't want to be overbearing or, in his face at all. He finally gave me this wonderful chance, and look at the end result.
Yes. How about your management, Clark? I mean, because again, it takes time away from spot reporting, and to be able to do this kind of work is time consuming. So what does your management tell you?
So my management was great. It is time consuming. We use the phrase feed the beast, which is just the reality that you work in, 24-hour newsrooms that are updated every hour. There's not, this idea of you've got to feed the beast. And so what agreement we came to that worked out well for us in this story and had a couple maybe unforeseen benefits when we started is we did have probably throughout all of the stories 4 or 5 4-minute pieces we had worked on. They had gone to legal. We sent them to other editors. What do you think? How can we improve? Blah, blah, blah. But, and it's like what Wendy said. I'm with her in her camp. I don't write down questions. I know what I'm talking about. And so what happened is as this whole story was unfolding, I knew it well enough that I could go, wait a minute, that's not right. We had one example where a caseworker did something in the case of a dead baby, and the policy manual, the agency's own policy manual, specifically said to not do those 2 things. Well, it wasn't a 4-minute piece, it was a 1.5 day turn, but my management loved me at that point because I had a story that no one else in our market had, and I led every newscast with this thing that we got just because I knew what I was investigating. All I'd done was I grabbed a bottle of wine and read the policy manual. 2 benefits, the wine and the story.
And a sleep aid.
Right. You know, it was a good day. So, you know, stuff like that came up, and it bought me time, right? So you know, we had a great day that day, and we won, you know, in our market, and that probably bought me a day later on down the road to say, hey, listen, I need you to pull me off the street because we've got this other stuff going on. I need a day to get this big story together. Yada, yada, yada. So I think, you know, and like these guys have said, we all have great managers. It's an ebb and flow. You're going to have days where they say, I just can't afford to have you go like hide in a dark hole and work on this investigative thing. And then there's other days where you look at them and you go, I got to hide in my dark hole. And they say, you know, all right.
That's true.
See ya, you know.
And it pays off.
Right.
Madeleine, yours was a year-long investigation?
Still year and a half at least, I think.
So that is takes a lot of time away from doing other things.
Yeah, that's all I've done. I mean, that's all I did. That's all lead producer did. That's all. We pulled a person off of web development and our apps to do the online presentation. And we hired a freelancer for 6 months who focused only on getting court like the few public documents that did exist, retrieving all of those from across the state. So,
at what point did your management say, okay, you've got the germ, you know, of a story here, we're going to let you go with it? Because, you know, you can't just say, I've got an idea. Can you just do nothing else?
I think it's because you have to establish a track record for yourself with this company that they're going to trust you, so that when you go in and pitch a story to your editor, it's not like, well, we have no example of this working before with this person. So at the point at which I came to my 2 editors immediately after meeting with this whistleblower and said, you know, I have this, what seems like an amazing story, and this is what I think, you know, they trusted me at that point because of other work I'd done, and they were the first to recognize the scope of it actually. You know, like, wait a minute, this is potentially huge. I mean, to put it into perspective, no one has ever come forward on that level in any archdiocese in the country. And we didn't have, and then when we later got leaked documents, no one has ever gotten those documents outside of a lawsuit, and certainly not documents that were written like 3 weeks ago. And certainly no one has gotten like leaked recordings of the Archbishop talking to his priest, you know, 2 days ago or whatever. So it just, they recognized it. And then it was a hardship though. It was a hardship for the newsroom because we kept pulling. I mean, these people would go to like this mystery destination because we had a different office, like in the same building. It's a large building. So people would just start disappearing, you know, to be like, oh, where's Sasha? Oh, Sasha's with Madeleine. Oh, where's Tom Shuck? Oh, Tom Shuck is with Madeleine. And people didn't know what was going on at first because we were just researching. So there's all this speculation about like, what are these guys up to? But no, the resources were there, and there was never, I mean, I like to think I'm pretty persuasive, and so I tend to operate and just do it, and you know, like it'll be so awesome that they'll be like, yes, take more time, you know, this is amazing. So I think that like I'm encouraging them to be a little rebellious as well, and I think they have that instinct in them. And then, you know, I don't think there really are there are very few actual rules in this business, and so I think a lot of times people spend too much time in newsroom being like, well, the policy says we have to do our pieces this long or that long, or we have to do, and just forget it. Like we were like, you know, one piece was like 14 minutes long, another was like 11 and a half. I mean, they were probably presenting serious challenges for the clock, but that's the length they needed to be, and that's what they were, and fortunately didn't, I mean, there's some that didn't, you know, like one of you said, you know, it's not good to always have like a 6-minute piece, can sometimes be a better 3-minute piece, but I mean, never got any sort of sense of like, you know, you don't have the airtime that you want, or, and the resources. I mean, for us, we're not like a tiny newsroom, but Minnesota Public Radio is not like the New York Times or something, and so for the editors to put 16 people in a newsroom our size on this investigation just shows you that there is that level of commitment there if you work at the right places to find the editors who are as excited, sometimes even more excited than you are about the story. So you're not in a kind of fight, you're in like this awesome collaboration.
I don't remember who it was when I was reading about your reporting, one news director, whose news director is Mary Beth? Oh, okay. She had it was a great quote. She said, when people rely on the system and that system fails them, it hurts the very fabric of our society. It's the responsibility of journalists to shine a light on difficult situations like this so the community itself can stand up and demand change. I think that is a perfect synopsis, description of what investigative journalism can and does accomplish. So what I'd like to know is what the end result was of each of your investigations. What has it led to? Is it ongoing? What are the things that you can point to that say, you know what, we made a difference in our community or in the country? So let's start with Noah.
On this story, we got short yellow lights fixed in Florida. We got the state to pretty quickly mandate longer yellow lights, which in turn dropped the amount of revenue cities in the state were collecting by anywhere from 70 to 90%. Because this technology is run by a private company and they charge a lot of money, red light camera programs are more or less collapsing in cities around Florida at this point, and there's a lot of them starting to yank them out. It proved what we were showing the entire time, which was it was not about safety, as they all initially claimed, it was about profit. Because now that they're not turning a profit, counties and cities are saying the hell with it and they're getting rid of them. So it was nice to say at the end, we were right. And to the biggest thing is that we leveled the playing field for our viewers. And it's now no longer unfairly ticketing drivers. We saw about $100 million change in the last year and a half on that. So,
boy, the city controllers must not like you.
I was taking off a lot of Christmas cards this year.
Yeah, but the public, no doubt, heralds you as a hero. What were the results of your investigation, Wendy, that made a difference?
You know, this was the most rewarding investigation I've ever done because we sought justice for the wrongly accused, and we got it for them. We did. It led to a city hall review. It led to the removal of the fire marshal and the supervisor of the arson unit and 2 arson investigators. It led to a criminal probe by state police, which determined that the 2 arson investigators had lied under oath repeatedly to the grand jury about the dog and how superior the dog was compared to the crime lab, which is absolutely not true. They had recommended criminal charges against the 2 arson investigators. Unfortunately, our county attorney decided not to prosecute either arson investigator, but he essentially did better. He banished them to the Brady List. The Brady List is a database of peace officers. These arson investigators are police officers, if you will, with marred integrity. So their credibility and competence and reliability can be tested if they're ever called to a trial or on the witness stand to testify in any case. So I was very, very proud of that. It also led to an internal affairs investigation, which is currently ongoing right now. They had a law firm do that. There was so much public outrage over this that they had a law firm do this so that the results of this administrative investigation will become public and it won't be shielded under attorney work product and attorney-client privilege.
Did the woman who was accused of arson and spent her whole life savings, did she sue and get her money back?
She's in the process of that, yes. And unfortunately, she lost her civil case, which is the irony in this story. She actually lost the civil case because the jury did not know that this fire was not an arson. And the jury did not know about the misconduct of these arson investigators. So now it's currently on appeal, and I'm hopeful that it will be overturned.
And that she gets a better lawyer, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And another gentleman we profiled, Carl Caples, he just sued the city of Phoenix in a wrongful arrest and a civil rights lawsuit and is demanding a jury trial. So I think he has a very, very strong case. He spent 16 months in the Maricopa County Jail for nothing,
Is the dog okay?
Oh, the dog. The dog has been retired.
Through no fault of his own.
I know. State Farm Insurance operates the arson dog program nationally, and they retired the dog, forcibly retired the dog. So,
if we can, wrap them up a little quickly, because I want to go to the audience. So, tell me what happened as the result of your amazing journey.
So the state director of the Department of Social Services in South Carolina resigned about a month into our reporting, and also the regional office, or the county office in South Carolina's largest county was moved after 17 years to another area of the business.
Are there more caseworkers now? Because the story was really about how the...
Right, so the South Carolina State General Assembly just went into session in January, beginning of this month, and so they have added, 50 emergency caseworkers and have implemented a bill to add 200 more, so 250 total, and about a $30 million increase in funding to the agency overall.
That's terrific. I mean, that's the result of your reporting, and hopefully that's going to save children from horrible abuse, and, you know, congratulations.
There's a number of bills on the table, and so there's a lot moving forward. They have been sued by a national children's rights group to kind of put some laws behind some of this stuff, and so there's pieces moving forward.
Great work. Madeleine, what's the result?
A lot of things, but I'll try to be very... So a couple days into the story, the top deputy of the Archdiocese resigned. They canceled a $160 million capital campaign. They started pulling priests who'd been accused, who no one knew they'd been accused, pulling them out of parishes. Some of them are on leave, some of them are completely gone from, some of them are in the process of being out of the priesthood. The police opened up several criminal investigations. Some of those are ongoing. Some of those involve different jurisdictions in different states. We named nearly 70 people that had priests or deacons who'd been accused of child sex abuse, and so that had a ripple effect as those people served in other states, and so that sort of triggered like these mini clergy abuse scandals around the country when local reporters looked at our website and continued their own reporting, including like demands for different bishops to release lists. A judge ordered the Archdiocese to release its list of abusive priests, and so that happened under court order. Many lawsuits were filed by survivors of clergy sex abuse and their families. And then just on Friday, while we were getting ready to go to this, the Archdiocese filed for bankruptcy. So,
well,
it continues.
It continues. I have so many more questions, you know, about the online component, how important that was, but I really do want to hear from you, your questions that you might have for our fantastic panelists here. So, Abby.
I have to ask the first question. Thanks so much to all of you, and congratulations. It's really been great to meet you and learn more about your reporting. Madeleine, you and I were speaking earlier about sort of interviewing techniques. I'm specifically referring to your interview with the priest. Right. I'd be curious to hear from all of you just tips on when you're approaching sort of a sensitive interviewee, or, you know, how you get the ball rolling when you're, I mean, I know, Wendy, you were talking about going for the jugular, but, or preparation, but I mean, I know there are different tactics when you're approaching someone and trying to just sort of elicit information from them. So practical tips on that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of say what we were talking about earlier. So to me, it all comes down to like, what is this person's motivation to talk to me? And that's different for each person. So it's like, you know, the politician who just gave a speech is coming down from the podium is going to talk to all reporters right there because that's what the politician does. Whereas like, you know, the priest who's been like out of the public eye, who admitted in court 20 years ago to sexually abusing a child, might be in like a different category. But like, you know, everybody wants to talk to you. I mean, I just operate under that principle. That like everyone wants to talk, everybody likes to tell their story. So you just have to figure out like what their motivation is. And in the case of some of these priests, it really was like they felt like they hadn't been heard. Like that they felt like maybe the Archdiocese hadn't treated them fairly and they weren't understood. And a lot of them, some of them were kind of bored. Some of them, I don't think very many people called them to talk to them. Or when they did, you know, it was like reporters would like show up at their front door and like the priest would open the door and the first question would be like, why did you rape this child? And it's like, whoa, you know, like no one's gonna answer that question. Like that question's never going to be answered by anyone, if that's like the reporter's first question in any kind of meaningful way, because even the most reasonable person is gonna be like, door slam, you know, who are you? And so I found that like some people who had been like declined to comment or refused to comment were actually like, no, come on inside, like, you know, because I think you need to approach it, if you're doing your job right, the reason why you want to talk to them is because you're curious about their situation, and I think you can reflect that in the way that you approach it, and like this, you know, it's not your job like to be like the stand-in for justice or something. I don't see it that way, at least. I'm there to like try to understand, and hopefully the person I'm talking to can see that, and then we can have an actual conversation. So.
Great.
I think in all of our stories, was there a confrontation in any? You had a mini one.
It depends what you consider a confrontation.
So
we don't like that word.
Right. So my rule of thumb, and I think this is something that like comes up, is before I run and stick a mic in someone's face aggressively, and sometimes you have to, is that I've exhausted every possible opportunity to get that interview. Wendy talked about the fire chief. I mean, she waited a year. So I'm just a huge fan. I think you know, if you go about these interviews the wrong way, it can really put a burden on your personal reputation in the market and your stations. And so there's some merit to really, you know, trudging the rope on getting the interview on an agreeable term. And I find that if I go that route, I probably end up with 2 or 3 little stories along the way. From talking to so-and-so's friend, hey, will you reach out to them and, you know, encourage them to talk to me? You know, I'm not trying to bite, I just want to know, blah, blah, blah. When I get there, finally, I get a better interview, I'm better prepared. Maybe I've gotten a couple stories out of a deal that I wouldn't have had I just, you know, gone for it without some of that legwork in the beginning.
And I think it's also important that there be honesty about what your mission is. That you not go in saying, hey, look, I know you've gotten a raw deal, I'm going to tell the real story, so open up to me, and then when, of course, that's not what you do, then it's a problem. So, I mean, I think honesty, even if it's unpleasant, is very critical.
And honesty on tape is really good tape a lot of times. I mean,
Yes.
awkward interaction is like the hallmark of journalism.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, Wendy, we know yours is preparation and jugular.
Well, in one of the stories, we did approach one of the fire captains, Captain Sam Richardson, outside his house with a camera. It is always a last resort. It should be considered a last resort. He wasn't allowed to talk to us. You know, the fire department does not allow that. They have a specific code of conduct that they have to adhere to. But, you know, we went up, and I just tried to be very nice to him. You know, I let him know I was doing these reports and I'd like to hear his side of the story. And he seemed to have concern about his reputation, and he just freely talked to me. He said to me that Barbara Sloan, a victim, came to me and told me nothing but lies. They were all liars. And all of this was on camera, rolling. He said what he said. You know, and he was very honest, and that's what he believed, and it was actually a great interview, and he knowingly engaged in it. But I just approached him very nicely and just tried to get him to talk. That's what you should always do, is you just try to get them to talk. You have to go above and beyond to be fair in every case. And I may have said always go for the jugular, but I mean, that's at the end, but you have to have the evidence first.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, but exhaust every
But even going after the jugular, you can do it in a nice way.
You can. Always be respectful, always. And even if they're calling you names, you know, I've been spat upon before. I've had doors slammed in my face. I've been pushed. You know, it's
Do your parents know this? They're in the audience.
They know this. That's why they're here with me today.
I'll limit it to 2 quick tips.
Okay.
One is the magic words are often, I want to give you a chance to tell your story. Not only is it non-confrontational, but it makes the person think, this is my chance, and if I don't do it, I'm going to look bad, which often is very true. Even if they do talk, they often look bad. But I'm sure Madeleine probably uttered that half a dozen times over the course of her investigation. The other thing I would say is, to Wendy's point about tone, this thing looks like a weapon, all right? You go up and stick this in someone's face, and it's very aggressive. It looks aggressive on television. So what I noticed Madeleine was doing when she approached the priest, she was holding it low. That is a big body language thing. I know reporters who won't even use stick mics ever. They'll use lavalier mics and they'll hold them out because they're so much less confrontational than this looking thing right here. It looks like a sword. So my advice would be, don't ever stick a mic in somebody's face. Even if they talk, you're gonna look bad on video. And now everything's on video, so yeah. I'll leave it there.
I mean, from my day, in the olden days, the mics were even bigger, and of course they all had the blocks around them with the station's logo, and it looked like you were approaching your interview subject with a mallet. So you just, yeah, but what you say is true. Do we have a question?
Yes, hello. My name is Yasmin. I'm an MS student at Columbia. My first question is for Madeleine. You've worked on this story for almost a year, and it was about pedophilia, which was not a fun topic to work on for a whole year. How would you personally take step backs to kind of reflect on the story, and because you can be so emotionally attached to the story, how would you do that? What was the psychological process that you would do to do that?
It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because that is a really important thing to talk about in newsrooms. For me, it was, yeah, it's like you said, it's really dark, and there's also, so two things would happen. One is like, if you're reading, you know, tens of thousands of pages like about really graphic abuse, sometimes it's overwhelming, and sometimes you're just so tuned out to it at a certain point that you're like, this is no longer alarming to me, and that's a problem. That's something I need to be worried about. So I think the people on the team like all talked about that, and then, but then what I would do like on a practical level is like alternate the type of reporting I was doing. So like if I had a stretch of some of the worst documents I read, which were like these victims being grilled by the archdiocese lawyers, like, you know, tell me what part of the sleeping bag you were on, and like just, it got like very detailed and long. I would vary that with something that's just like technical, like I'm gonna go build a spreadsheet, you know, because like that's not dark at all. Hopefully, right?
Really?
Not compared to that, you know. And then also I think too, like just being aware of like I had one interview that was more difficult than others, and I think it's just helpful to like call your other people that work. That's why it's so great, but when you can work on a team, because you can call someone else who's like in the middle of that and just say, wow, that was super hard, and just have that conversation, even if it's like 2 minutes long.
It's like a support group.
Yeah, because like, and they get it, and but it definitely does take a toll. I mean, that's like the only thing I've done. I mean, that's like my world since. Yeah. But the good thing too, I think, in this project is that there were so many people that were survivors of sexual abuse who would contact us and say, you know, thank you for doing this story, or thank you for telling me this specific fact about my abuser. So that provided like motivation too, to be like, okay, I can figure this out on my own end and get through it. But if I hadn't done that, if I just been like, I don't care, or pretend like I wasn't disturbed at all by it, then I don't think I would have been able to do this for a year and a half.
And I must say that when it involves children, somehow, well, not somehow, I mean, it's obvious why, that it is especially difficult. And Clark, you also dealt with children, and you must have been emotionally drained hearing, as did Madeleine, about these horrible abuses.
Yeah, Madeleine brings up a good point. You've got to know what you're doing, meaning you got to know what you're reporting on, and that you're a human too, right? You're not like some robot. So there were a couple days during the trial for the kid who was murdered where I got, my news director was like, you're just mad, you know, because this is sick and gross, and you need to go home and just like nap or something. And then another thing I did, and kind of like what Madeline was saying, there were a couple days where I went to our manager and I said, hey, listen, today I need to go cover like clowns and bunnies. You know, find me some clowns and some bunnies. And so they were great. They would, you know, I would, you know, I'm putting all this stuff together, and I ended up in elementary school with, you know, 4-year-olds, and we're like, you know, doing paper mache or something, you know. So I mean, it would.
Yeah, you need the relief.
You need that, you know. It was work, but it wasn't. It was like, this is thoughtless, and I'm thankful for that today. And so you balance that for sure.
Do we have another question?
Yes, I do. It's a more light question in the sense that I was just wondering, you're producing per year thousands almost of stories. How did you select that one story that you submitted for the DuPont Awards?
Real simply, I think you look at where you were able to prompt change. And sometimes it's getting a law written, sometimes it's making life changes for people that you're covering, sometimes it's changing things across your state, but you tend to know which are your big impact stories, and that's, I think, in all of our cases, what we all submitted, things that got action, prompted change.
And in fact, it's one of the things that we in the jury look for. We are looking for stories that have had an impact, that bring about change. It's not the only criterion, obviously, but when you can present something as compelling and as you know, successful as all you did in bringing about change, it becomes obvious that that's what you want to present, and it becomes one reason why we award you. And hopefully with our giving you the DuPont or bestowing it, that it'll give encouragement to you and your teams and your management to keep going and doing this kind of reporting. Are there others with questions?
Hi, thank you so much again for being here, guys. So it sounds like you all did hit roadblocks, or there were days when you were just like, I can't deal with this anymore. What did you do during those times? And you know, right? Am I right that that's happened to all of
lots.
you?
Drink lots. Wine. No, I'm kidding. I like wine, people.
It sounds like you all did hit roadblocks at some point or the other during these like months-long or sometimes year-long investigations.
Yeah, and I assume sometimes it was emotional roadblocks, as we've discussed, but other times maybe legal roadblocks or public official roadblocks, or...
We hit a lot of public official roadblocks. We had a mayor who was denying that anything wrong was done. We had a city councilman who started the ball rolling, though, on this project in 2013. I had a great deal of trouble with public records and the suppression of public records along the way. And also to the fact about, you know, how you feel as a journalist for this. Sometimes I felt like a grief counselor to these victims who would call me and they were crying, you know, they were distraught. And that's how I came up with the title, Raked Over the Coals, because I was feeling how they were feeling while I was investigating this.
It was a great title.
And, you know, one of the things that I think is so important, and this is by far my favorite saying, it's by Hunter S. Thompson, we cannot expect people to have respect for law and order until we teach respect to those we have entrusted to enforce those laws. And in my head, I just lived by that motto and that saying the entire time, and just straight ahead the whole way. And I didn't stop, and I won't stop, and I was relentless, and I will continue to be until we effect the change that needs to happen.
Did any of you face the lawyers and say, you know what, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're going to have a problem if you do this? How involved were the lawyers as roadblocks or as helpers in getting what you needed to get out?
I'll keep it real short here. I mean, lawyers can be your best friends. You can choose to work with them or you can choose to work against them. And when they say you can't do this, it's usually because they're trying to protect you. So at the end of the day, if they give us a suggestion, we try to work with them and say, how can we do it in a way that's more appropriate?
Right, that's what I always would counsel, you know, when working with the lawyers. Let's figure out a way that we can do this that's not illegal, but that we do achieve the same results. Any legal problems here?
No, not really. Ours are wonderful. They're wonderful. I would always go in, when Mark and I would go in for legal review, which was rigorous, I would always defend my story like an attorney, and I would argue back and forth with the lawyers.
Well, your legal background
came
in
handy.
Right.
They earned their money, but as I said before, we always have the burden of proof, so when you go through legal review, know that going in. And be careful and mindful of sound bites, if you will, that have defamatory statements in them, or, you know, character assassinations. You have to be very mindful of all of that before you go into legal review. But ours are wonderful, and they applauded our work and were so excited. And they always say to me, Wendy, you know, tie it to the public record. If you can find it in the public record, that's a safeguard for us from getting sued. That's a safeguard.
A lot of what you did.
Yeah, so we're all three lucky to have super lawyers. They're just awesome.
We all work for Gannett, by the way.
We all work for
The
Gannett.
three of us do.
Love it. Yeah. So we have we have Barbara Wall and Mark Ferris are fantastic, and in addition to being fantastic lawyers, they're also really great editors. They really are. They know journalism and they know stories, and they do say, you know, tie it to the public record. And so it's one, I forget who said it, but going back to the idea of records and doing that digging, you know, thinking about the interview and can you grab some of that stuff along the way? Well, it helps even in the interview, you can tie it back, right? You know, well, okay, you know, you say A, public record says B, help me hash it out. You get to play dumb for a minute, you know, and who knows what you get in the answer. The same can be true of writing the story. You may grab a public record that tells you something, you're able to prove it or link it, and it Yeah, it increases some safety. We dealt with a little bit, with kids in abuse. HIPAA and a lot of these child service records are sealed for good reason. These, foster cares in complicated family situations, and so it became even more important and harder to really have some, paper before we went on TV and said, this family's really shoddy, or the state, didn't do A, B, and C, and now this kid's dead, and it's sort of their fault, like those sorts of things.
I want to make sure that the audience understood that when I was asking about the lawyers, they are really helpful.
They're
I
awesome.
mean, they're not there as roadblocks. It may be that it's something you have to deal with, but they are there to help.
And it's worth mentioning too, I think, that sometimes, and I think we've all probably said this, I've had ideas before and not known exactly how to go get that story. And the lawyers have been a great resource to say, I kind of know A and B, and I'm just not sure how to execute it, how to get it from this idea we had in a meeting to a TV story. And they're awesome about, well, what if you tried this? Well, we've tried that before, and it hasn't created a problem. We've been safe doing that. So
lawyers are trained investigators, and that's why oftentimes those two professions meld or work in a complementary fashion, and it's a terrific asset to have. I know we have gone way beyond what we were supposed to be, but I want to commend the audience for being, this is the end of the day, and you've no doubt gone to others, so thank you so much for your attention and for the respect and attention that you showed to this fabulous panel. I can't say enough good things about the work they did, and I'm so proud that we, in the DuPont, of the DuPont jury, were able to award such terrific work and set a standard for all other news organizations. So again, congratulations to you all. Thank you so much.